There is something about the ocean that no map has ever truly captured. You can chart every coastline, you can measure every depth, you can fill entire libraries with tide tables and navigation records and satellite data, and still the sea keeps its secrets. I have been sitting with one particular secret for a very long time. It came to me first through a faded entry in a 19th century ship's logbook, written in the careful handwriting of a man who was clearly choosing every word with great deliberateness, as if he understood that what he was recording would outlast him, and that whoever read it someday needed to believe it. The entry described an island that should not have been there, an island that made compasses spin, an island that every single sailor who had ever seen it turned away from and never approached again. This is that story, not the ghost story version, the real one, the historical one. The one built not from legend, but from logbooks, from private letters, from the quiet testimony of professional men who had nothing to gain from exaggerating what they saw and everything to lose from being disbelieved. To understand why this story matters, you first have to understand the world these sailors inhabited. We are talking about the latter half of the 19th century, a period that gets romanticized in paintings, tall ships, full sails, golden light on open water. But for the men who actually lived it, a long ocean voyage was something closer to a prolonged test of survival. When a cargo vessel left port in 1878, bound for a destination 6 weeks away, that crew was completely and utterly alone. No radios, no weather satellites, no possibility of rescue if something went wrong. You had your ship, your crew, your charts, and the sea. The charts of that era were genuine achievements. Centuries of careful survey work had mapped most of the world's major trade routes with reasonable accuracy. Captains on established runs knew what to expect: the prevailing winds, the seasonal currents, where the reefs were, and where the open water ran deep and safe. But every experienced sailor knew that the charts had limits. The ocean is older than human record-keeping, and it contains things that do not always appear on maps. Before I take you to the island itself, I need to spend a moment on the compass, because without understanding what the compass meant to a 19th century sailor, you cannot fully understand what it meant when the compass failed. The magnetic compass had guided sailors for 700 years by the time of our story. It was not simply a tool. It was the thread connecting a navigator to the known world. A sailor at sea used a technique called dead reckoning, calculating his position from his starting point, his speed, and his heading. Take away the heading, and the entire system of knowing where you are collapses completely. In the middle of the open ocean, with no stars visible and no landmarks in any direction, a spinning compass meant you had no idea which way you were moving. You could sail in circles for days without knowing it. Ships had been lost that way. The maritime record is full of vessels that vanished without explanation, and compass anomalies, pockets of magnetic interference powerful enough to destroy a navigator's reckoning, are considered a genuine contributing factor in more than a few of those disappearances. So when a compass began to spin near this island, when the needle that had faithfully held north for weeks of open ocean sailing suddenly began to drift and wander and rotate, the effect on every man aboard was not inconvenience, it was terror. And here is the detail that makes this story something more than folklore. The compass did not fail everywhere. It did not fail in storms or fog or the deepest stretches of empty ocean. It only failed near the island. The moment the ship turned away, the needle settled quietly back to north, as though nothing had ever happened. That specific, location-dependent pattern is what separates this account from superstition and places it firmly in the territory of genuine historical inquiry. The earliest documented account I have been able to trace dates to the autumn of 1874. A British cargo vessel, I will call her of the Alderton, as the ship's true name remains a matter of archival dispute, was making a southerly passage through the South Atlantic, bound for the western coast of Africa. The voyage had been unremarkable for 3 weeks. The captain kept his log with careful, professional regularity. Wind, speed, weather, the health of his crew. Then, on the morning of October 14th, a date the captain underlined in the original entry, which is unusual, the kind of thing a man does when he wants to make absolutely certain that whoever reads this afterward understands that the date matters. The tone of the log changes. After the standard position and weather notation, there is a sentence that stops you cold. The captain wrote, "Sighted land where no land ought to be." Just that, simple, controlled. You can almost feel the discipline it took to write so calmly about something that had clearly shaken him. He described the island in terms that would be echoed, almost word for word, by sailors who encountered the same place over the following decades. Dark rock, near vertical cliffs, no visible beach, the waves striking the base with violence that seemed out of proportion to the calm conditions elsewhere on the water. He ordered the ship toward it, not dangerously close, but close enough to make a proper record. He was a professional. He wanted to note the position, mark the discrepancy with the charts, do his job. Then the first officer called him to the navigation room. The compass was behaving strangely. The captain watched the needle of his primary compass slowly rotate away from north. He describes the motion in his log as deliberate, a word that reveals more than he perhaps intended, because deliberate implies intention, and a compass needle has no intention. But that is how it felt, like something turning away on purpose. He ordered a second compass checked, same result. He ordered a third, a small personal compass, a gift from his wife that he had carried without incident on 12 voyages. Same result. The captain went up to the deck. He stood at the railing. He looked at the island for a long time without writing anything. And then, in a passage that is clearly not meant for official eyes, he put down something almost private. He wrote, "The place gives me a feeling I cannot account for and do not intend to investigate further." He ordered the ship to come about. Within the hour, all 3 compasses were reading correctly. He recorded the position, noting no corresponding landmass on any chart, and added one final line that would become, in the quiet maritime world, an unofficial warning passed from captain to captain for decades afterward. He wrote, "I would counsel any captain of good judgment to give this location wide passage." That warning spread the way important things have always spread among seafaring people. Not in newspapers or official notices, not on any chart, but in the taverns and boarding houses of port cities, in quiet conversations between experienced men who trusted each other more than they trusted printed documents. This oral tradition of the sea is something that history books consistently undervalue. We think of knowledge as written, but for sailors, the most critical knowledge, the knowledge that kept men alive, lived in spoken memory passed from one generation to the next. An old captain would lean toward a younger one in a Liverpool pub and say quietly that he had seen something strange in a certain stretch of the South Atlantic, and the younger man would listen with complete seriousness because he understood that warnings from men like that were not given lightly. What makes the island's story remarkable is its consistency across multiple independent sources. Over the following 2 decades, accounts accumulated from British ships and French ships and Portuguese ships and American ships, from captains who had never met, in some cases had never visited the same ports, who had no way of comparing notes before they encountered what they encountered, and yet they all described the same thing: the dark cliffs, the absence of birds, the atmospheric heaviness, the compass failure, the decision to turn away. A story that grew in the telling would have accumulated drama, embellishment, supernatural color. This story did not. If anything, it shrank. The men who had actually seen the island tended to describe it briefly and then fall silent. They did not elaborate, they did not exaggerate. When something frightens a person to the bone, they tend not to reach for the theatrical. They just tell you what happened, and they let facts carry the weight. Now I want to tell you something that I find genuinely remarkable, something that shifts this story from maritime folklore into serious scientific territory. The science does not debunk what those sailors experienced. The science explains it. We now understand that the Earth's magnetic field is not uniform. It does not spread evenly across the planet like a smooth, invisible blanket. It has lumps and irregularities. In certain locations, local geology creates magnetic fields dramatically different from the surrounding area, fields powerful enough to deflect compass needles severely, or in extreme cases to make them spin. These are called magnetic anomalies, and the most dramatic documented example is the Kursk magnetic anomaly in Russia, where iron ore deposits so vast and so close to the surface generate a magnetic field strong enough to cause compass deviations of up to 60 degrees. 60 degrees! Not a subtle drift, your compass pointing southeast when true north is directly ahead. This anomaly was noticed by navigators centuries before it was understood scientifically. The ocean has its own version of this phenomenon, and it is concentrated along the mid-ocean ridges, the enormous underwater mountain chains where tectonic plates pull apart and new ocean floor is constantly created from volcanic material welling up from the Earth's interior. The South Atlantic is bisected by one of the most geologically active sections of this system. Islands along this ridge, the Azores, St. Helena, Tristan da Cunha, are all products of the same volcanic forces, and ships near Tristan da Cunha, which sits in waters of extraordinary magnetic complexity, have historically reported exactly the kind of navigational irregularities our sailors described.